tonight. Somebody tell me if I sound okay. Pretty please. I am kind of redoing. So last night, I did a live on TikTok and on YouTube. Only the StreamYard version, my connection to YouTube, whatever, something went wrong and it was black, no video, and silent. So the point of last night was for my podcast. And without video and without audio, it makes for a fairly boring podcast I'm sure nobody would have liked. So I decided I was going to see what went wrong with last night as far as the StreamYard YouTube stream, see if I could fix it and see if I get it right. But I need to go live. So I thought, you know what? I'll go live again and I will talk to people. Maybe I will see if I can add people because I don't know how all that stuff works. I just invited Ash up. No, don't end it. Just reached the fan live too. And okay. Okay, nobody's told me yet if you can hear me on TikTok. Comments. Hey Vic, Scotland. Scotland! I am so happy to see Scotland. Maybe I'll get a chance to talk about what a absolutely amazing vacation my wife and I had there a couple of years ago. Only trip we've taken. We've been married 31 years now. I gave her our anniversary present in the Fairy Glen. So that is a day I will never forget. I see and hear you. Sweet, thanks, Paul. That means I've got something going right tonight. Must be on your end. Hi, Smartmouth, can you hear me? Please say yes. Can you hear me on TikTok? TikTok's all good. Great. Things are working for a change, guys. So here's my plan for tonight. I'm going to talk about the whole gun control thing again so that my YouTube viewers can hear what I have to say on that, and so that I'll have something for my podcast. Yes. Yeah. You know, I could have worn that. I should have thought of that. I'm also going to try and pay attention to the comments on both of the screens. And if I can, invite somebody up so I can learn how to do that on TikTok. And I know how to do that on the StreamYard, but I think I need somebody's email. I don't know. Maybe I can paste the link in the chat. Yeah, that's what I did last time. Anyway, last night I talked about gun control. I'm tired after 40 years of the gun control debate. Started in the 1980s, 1981, when Reagan got shot by Hinckley, and he used a .38 special, which was as easy to buy as cigarettes. So there was a big outcry because our national hero, I mean, Reagan was still super popular back then, even among a lot of Democrats. And there's a large outcry. Why is it so easy to get these weapons? It's criminal. It shouldn't be like that. 12 years later, we got the Brady Bill, which was background checks, and what was the other part of the Brady Bill? Oh, yeah, the The Brady Bill, background checks, oh, waiting periods. So you couldn't just walk up to the store and buy one. Now, that doesn't mean everybody has waiting periods. It all went to court and all that. And yes, you can implement waiting periods. Anyway, fast forward to Columbine. I remember exactly where I was when Columbine happened. I remember exactly that sinking, big, gaping hole feeling I had in my chest as I pulled over and I'm listening to the radio and hearing about what was going on in Columbine. And that was the first real big one in my memory. And I thought, wow, I didn't know what to think, really. I mean, I've got my 2 young sons in the car, and my wife was pregnant with our daughter, and thinking, what kind of world are we bringing them up in? And by then, the gun debate had been going for, 20 years almost, the whole gun control debate. Because as soon as somebody said Brady Bill, the NRA changed from being a sport advocacy organization that taught people responsible use of weapons, and it became a arm of the Republican Party. And I used to be a member. And for those who didn't hear me last night, I am a gun owner. I've always been a gun owner. I've got plenty of guns. They're not toys. They're not things that I show off. All of them are either collectors or utility items, tools. I do not have any assault rifles. And if anybody wants to come up in the questions or the comments or whatever and say, what's an assault rifle? Go away. Because anybody who wants to try and use that, you can't even define an assault weapon. If you want to use that argument, you're being an idiot, you're ignorant, you're intellectually honest, or maybe you really don't know the difference between a semi-automatic hunting rifle and an assault weapon. And if you don't know the difference, then you have absolutely no business being around any kind of firearm because you're too damn stupid. So there's my thoughts on that. We do not need assault rifles on our city streets anywhere. I'm reading a comment. Yeah, Stu. My grandfather was a retired cop from Chicago, and before he retired, Chicago was the John Dillinger, Al Capone days. He walked a beat. The only thing he carried was a .38. That's here at the house. It's got his name engraved on it. It's really cool. But he didn't need a flak vest and an assault rifle strapped to his chest. He didn't need to drive around in military vehicles because he was a beat cop. He knew the people in his neighborhood, and people didn't see him as the enemy. Kids didn't see him as the enemy. Now we have a militarized police force that everybody sees as the enemy, and they're all carrying around assault weapons. And I get it that we started doing the assault weapons with our police. I can't remember the year, but there was a super ugly bank robbery in California, and all the bad guys had automatic weapons, and the cops had the standard sidearm. They didn't have the military weapons, and it was really bad for the cops that day. After that's when we started seeing cops carrying assault rifles and the advent of the militarized police forces. Anyway, I got a little bit off track because the point is I'm tired of the gun control debate. 44 years after Reagan was shot and the gun debate started, we haven't seen any progress whatsoever. We're still seeing school shootings. And the one the other day in Minnesota, what got me to bring this topic up finally in my videos, is that when that happened, I'm very sickened to say, I didn't feel a lot. I didn't get that hole in my heart like I did when Sandy Hook happened and Uvalde and Parkland and Columbine. It didn't happen. It was another news day. And that's when I knew I had to finally talk about this subject in my videos. So that's why I'm talking about it today. For those who think that the Second Amendment is sacrosanct, that if you allow any gun law to pass, then it's a slippery slope, I ask you to look at Roe v. Wade. Because for years, people said Roe v. Wade is safe, it's established law and all that stuff. But now it's gone, right? Because our government decided that they could just take that right away. It was established law. The court said back in 73 that a woman has a right to privacy, a woman has a right to her own healthcare choices. But then we got a Supreme Court that said, maybe not. That's not a right. You can't have it. And now we've got a president who is on record in his previous, I don't know, was it in the campaign or was it in his previous administration when he was filmed talking to somebody about you take their guns away from them and then worry about going to court later. And now, just was it yesterday or the day before? It was yesterday. Trump DOJ is looking at ways to ban transgender Americans from owning guns, sources say. And you know, whoops, wrong one. That's not even to me, the canary in the coal mine. To Second Amendment proponents, it probably is. I saw the NRA today came out with a hellfire and brimstone comments about how we will not let this stand, blah, blah, blah. They're not supporting this idea by the administration, which really is, I think, one, just yet another way to try and pick on transgender people. But two, if they can get away with this, it's a starting point. Because they're working on getting rid of our Fifth Amendment right to due process. They're trying to say that the 14th Amendment doesn't exist when it does. They're trying to say that habeas corpus doesn't apply to non-citizens. They're trying to say that the First Amendment is not absolute, even though it says Congress shall make no law restricting people's free speech or restricting a free press. And yet we've got government censors in newsrooms. And I've got a video coming out Monday morning that speaks a lot more to that. But for now, the point is these guys are wearing away our rights. They're taking them away. And if you're a Second Amendment proponent and can't see that, I almost feel bad for you, because your Second Amendment right to a firearm is more at risk now than it has ever been under any Democratic president. I remember when the assault weapons ban went through in 1994, I want to say. It was there for 10 years. And, you know, not a single knock on my door. The government never came for any of my weapons. But now, MAGA's hero is openly saying he's going to start coming and taking people's guns. So think about that, Second Amendment people. And on the other side, folks who think that gun control is the solution, that banning guns and rules for locks and all of that stuff is the solution. You couldn't be more wrong, because that would imply that the guns are the problem. Access to guns plays a huge factor in all these shootings, but it's not the biggest factor in my mind, because the biggest factor in my mind is the sociological changes that have happened from the time that I was a kid until now. It's getting harder and harder and harder for people to survive. People can't afford rent or to purchase a home. They can't afford groceries. They can't afford to go to the doctor. They have to spend more of their life working to live, and they don't have time to spend with their kids. They're under more stress. So when they are at home, they're tired or they're cranky. They don't get to go to the ballpark and watch their kids play. Hell, they probably don't even get to let their kids play, because just to sign a kid up for soccer these days costs over $100 a kid. How are people supposed to enjoy family time when they can't be a family, when they don't have time to be a family, when they can't afford to be a family? That is the problem that we have to solve. If we solve the income inequality problem in this country, if we have a living wage, if we have a economy that works for the working class, that is when we start to see a reduction in violence, not just school shootings, but gun violence and crime in general. Even though crime's been coming down, despite what the Orange Julius Caesar would tell us, crime has been coming down all over the country. Well, not in the red states. But anyway, that is, in my mind, the biggest driver. And if we solve that, I think we will go far, far closer to solving the gun violence problem. That's one piece. Another big piece is our public education system. I remember the day that I came home and I told my dad that Mr. Martinez was picking on me. And my dad, that son of a gun, you know what he said? He said, "What did you do wrong?" Like, wait a minute. Whoa, wait, time out. You're supposed to back me up. He's like, "I am. That's why I'm asking you what you did wrong." He didn't run to the school and yell at Mr. Martinez for kicking me out of class that day. He asked me what I did to single myself out. What was it about me that drew Mr. Martinez's attention and made him send me out of the class? He made me take responsibility for my actions, that dog. We don't see that anymore. And I can tell you that from experience, because after my 17 years working in the Department of Corrections, I was a teacher for 1 year, just 1 year. Because I had cases where students would misbehave and we'd have a teacher conference, and it was my fault as the teacher. It was always, every single time, my fault that the child misbehaved, or that the child wasn't doing their homework, or that the child just didn't care. It was somehow my fault as the teacher. I'd only been a teacher for a couple of months. We've got to get our public school system back to where it is a central part of our communities. No more of this school of choice crap. Because when you have schools of choice, what you have is cases like the 7th grade girl up in Gardner. I was walking into the class, first class of the morning, and she says, I don't remember exactly what she said. It was just so unbelievably disrespectful that my jaw was on the floor. So I looked at her, I said, "Get out, go to the office, tell Mrs. Levy that you are not in my class today." She left. And before I was done writing the date on the board, on the whiteboard, she was back. I said, "What are you doing?" She called the principal by her first name and said, "She told me to come back." I said, "Well, you go back and you tell Mrs. Levy that you were not in my class, period, for today." Later on that day, we had a conference with her mom, and her mom was just all kinds of angry because she had to drive all the way up there and meet with us. And she literally said that if I couldn't teach her kid without having to disrupt her in her day, then she would just pull her out of that school and take her to another school. And in a day and age where school funding is dependent upon school enrollment, well, every kid counts towards your budget. And they're already under budgeted. So We've got a economy that doesn't work for working people, doesn't allow people to spend time and enjoy time, quality time with their families. And we have a school system that isn't allowed to put any responsibility on kids. We have a school system where we've pretty much cut out the counselors. I mean, when my oldest was in high school, I was screaming mad because they had counselors, but they would only pay attention to the top graded kids. He was mid-level in his grades. And they wouldn't talk to him about college. I went down to the school. It's like, why aren't you talking to him about college? They didn't have time to focus on all the kids because they don't have the resources. So we need to resource our schools. We need to make a living economy for families again. When we do that, then we can reduce gun violence. We can reduce crime. We can hopefully stop seeing weekly, sometimes daily news events of school shootings. I mean, they're becoming so common these days. Sometimes I will see a social media post, another one today, and I go to look for it in the news, and I can't find it. CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, I check their websites, there's no mention. I check AP, there's no mention. Sometimes I do a Google search, and the only evidence I find is the local paper. Why do we not hear about them? Why are they not big news anymore? Well, because they're so damn common. It happens so much. And 40 years of the gun control debate has not produced a solution. Not a single solution. We have ideas. We have things that each side believes are solutions. More doors, more locks on the doors, metal detectors. You know what? When you turn your kid into or your school into a prison, that's not a healthy learning environment. And when you think that simply outlawing the weapons is going to stop, then you've got your head in the sand. Yes, secure buildings are necessary. Yes, nobody needs an assault weapon. When I was in the military, we went from the M16A or the M16 to the M16A1. And the difference was the selector switch. You could either single fire. On the M16, it was single fire and automatic fire, fully automatic. On the A1, and that was a long time ago, so if there's any experts in here and I'm getting the nomenclatures of the weapon wrong, don't come after me. Anyway, the A1 had single fire or 3-round burst because the military knows that a fully automatic weapon is terrible in a fight as far as a personal weapon because you have no aim. So there you have it. That was 23 minutes. Holy cow. So I need some questions from you folks. I need somebody to come up and join the conversation. You want to disagree with me or argue with me or debate me, as long as we remain respectful to each other, I'm perfectly fine with having somebody come up. Just let me know if you want to. At a minimum, somebody's got to give me some questions that I can answer. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to comment on something else I saw on the news today. I saw the news about Thomas Massie. He's a representative out of Kentucky. As far as I'm concerned, the guy's a real piece of garbage. He helped get Trump elected. And he voted for the big, beautiful bill, or as I call it, the Trump tax. He hasn't done anything worthwhile except that he is trying to get the Epstein list published. He's trying to get it out in the open, unredacted. So good for him for that. And today, he was on, I don't know, one of the right-wing news programs. I saw the video. and he said that he believes the right-wing billionaire who is funding a primary campaign against him may be on the list. So here's my question for the Democratic Party. If Thomas Massie can come out and accuse one of their big funders, because the guy funds lots and lots of Republican campaigns, if a Republican can call out a billionaire on the right, why can the Democrats not call out, or at a minimum reject, money from AIPAC? Why does a piece of garbage Kentucky Republican have more guts than almost the entirety of the Democratic Party in Washington? But Mr. V, DNC has broken us. I can't argue with you there, George. But it is a question that it was distracting me before I came on. I only saw it about an hour before I came on here, and now I reckon I'm going to have to do a video about that this weekend. It drives me nuts. I also saw, I think this was actually reported 2 days ago, that piece of garbage in our White House has decided to stop funding military aid to Eastern European countries in the forms of training and supplies, anything that would be used against Russia. And I immediately went back to the video that I did on November 6th, where I was just shocked. I woke up early in the morning, getting ready for work, and learned that Trump won. And I said in that video that my biggest fear was exactly what I saw in that headline, is that Donald Trump is going to take Russia's side, and he would help Russia march through Europe. Now, we haven't got to that point yet, but that headline tells me that I was way too close to right for comfort. Do I think the Epstein files will actually make a difference? Cheyenne. I tell you what, Cheyenne, if the actual Epstein files do get out, unredacted, with all of the Republicans and Democrats' names in them, I do think it can make a difference. I think it can shock us to our senses at least a little bit. And I think any Republican or Democrat that's on that list will never receive another vote. What happened with North Korea and Mango Mussolini today? I have not seen that headline if something happened with them today. Why is law enforcement not supportive of gun laws, especially with assault weapons? I believe law enforcement is more supportive of gun laws than against gun laws. Now, you go to somewhere like Colorado Springs, where you have the home of Focus on the Family and a bunch of right-wing Republicans. I mean, there's some real nut jobs up there. No, their sheriff and their police, they don't support any gun control laws. You come to a small town out in rural Colorado like mine, and my Democrat sheriff will not say that he supports any gun laws. But if you go to anything outside of a right-wing super crimson red city or a rural town in America, I think you find law enforcement more supportive of gun control laws than against. At least I've seen plenty of headlines. I mean, it's all anecdotal. I haven't seen a study on that. So I could be as wrong as possible, but I think law enforcement does support it. Stu is telling me that after the Dunblane school shooting in Scotland, any gun collectors with pistols had no choice to give them up, and it takes strong leadership to enact legislation like that people need to push change. You're right, Stu, and one of the points that I meant to make earlier when I was talking about Roe v. Wade versus Second Amendment. If we don't do something, I hope the Second Amendment people are listening. If we don't do something reasonable, if we don't come together with things that most people agree on, most gun owners agree that we don't need assault weapons ban or assault weapons. Most gun owners are fine with background checks. Most gun owners are fine with rules that say you have to lock up your weapons. Those are reasonable gun control measures that most gun owners, let alone most of America, would like to see implemented. And if we can't do that, then what's going to happen is we're going to get to a point of saturation. I don't personally know anybody today. Well, that's not true because I met somebody, but Brett Cross, father of Uvalde, I met him down at Texas A&M. Other than him, and I didn't know him before it happened. So I've never known somebody at the time of a school shooting when it happened. I've never known anybody been close enough to somebody to be affected. And now my daughter's a high school teacher, so anytime something like that happens, that's the first thing I think about. But it's only a matter of time, as frequent as they are, and not just school shootings, but any mass shootings, the churches, the Walmarts, the whatever. They're happening so often now that it is only a matter of time before we all know somebody. We are all going to know somebody sooner or later that is affected or lost to one of these mass shootings. And when we get to that point, when the Parkland generation grows up, and by Parkland generation, I'm talking about all the kids of their age, not just the kids from Parkland. When that generation grows up and takes power, the kids who had to suffer through shooting drills from preschool to graduation, and some of them in college, those kids are going to be in power someday. And they're not going to just say, let's have some reasonable gun control laws. They're going to say, we don't really need the Second Amendment. And they're going to have the power to repeal it. Think about that, Second Amendment people. If it's that precious to you, then protect it by being reasonable. Because if you don't, it's going to end up going away. I'm already hearing some of that generation talk about the need to repeal the Second Amendment. And frankly, if we're not going to protect kindergartners from this kind of horror, they won't get any argument from me. I won't be campaigning against them or donating to their political opponents because that's their position. You know, when I ran for Congress 14 years ago, 12 years ago, I ran for Congress in a very rural, very red district. I had a gun control or a concealed carry permit at the time because of some threats I had when I worked in the prison. I was a gun owner. Like I said, I've always been a gun owner. And when it came to the gun control issue, my point was this. If I had been elected, I would neither sponsor or work for or co-sponsor, whatever, any gun control legislation because my focus was going to be on working families, on protecting Social Security, protecting our veterans, things like that, healthcare. Those were going to be my objectives because even back then I believed that all these gun control laws at the end of the day, for the most part, were going to be a waste of time. If I were the president today and somebody gave me, Congress put a bill on my desk to ban assault weapons, I would sign it. But if I were president today, I would not be focused on that as my primary policy objective. I would be focused on a living wage, affordable health care, education systems that worked. Because if we solve those, then the gun violence becomes much less of a problem. Yes, and everyone who watched Uvalde, I mean, how anybody can argue that we just need more guns, more armed teachers or armed guards or what have you after Uvalde. I mean, that event totally ended that argument in my mind. Who's got some more questions? It's hard to keep up with two screens at the same time. It's kind of fun to try, but my eyes are crossing. Number of guns in the U.S. is what is saving us from martial law today. That fact is eye-opening. Is it, though? You think there aren't a lot of guns in Washington, D.C.? Where are all the "we need our guns to protect from tyranny" people? Where are they? Why aren't they in Washington, D.C. saying you can't do this? I don't think the number of guns is what's protecting us. I think the only thing protecting us right now is nothing, because they're building up to it. They're working their way in. They're getting tighter and tighter. It's only a matter of time, unless we, the people, do get out in the streets more. And we, the people, do constantly harangue our representatives' phone lines and emails and letterboxes. That's the only thing that's going to stop the martial law from eventually getting here. No, Tammy, when I was teaching and when I talked to my daughter, I've never heard of a teacher that wanted a gun. And frankly, I would really, I mean, there were, and I say this with all the love in my heart for teachers. The vast majority of teachers are good, just like I believe the vast majority of cops are good. But there's always a rotten egg in the barrel. There's always that one that should have retired a long time ago, or never should have been put in a room full of kids because they just don't have the temperament to handle it. Last thing I want to see is a teacher that carries a gun to school and just gets too stressed out one day. Trying to go back there. Trying to update my messages. Scotland banned them in 1996 after one incident, never happened again. And Australia had a bad shooting, and I'm not going to try and say exactly what they did, but I know that they had forced buybacks and very strict gun control after that. And guess what? Their country didn't fall apart. And for those of you who think that our founders wanted us to have a Second Amendment right to a personal weapon, I got news for you. Up until the 1950s, it was never interpreted in the law as a right, a personal right to carry a weapon or to bear arms, if you will. It was interpreted as a right to bear arms for the purpose of being a part of a well-regulated militia. That was the judicial ruling of hundreds of court cases from 1789 until the 1950s. It was in the 1950s when the the Federalist Society started getting their judges in enough positions and high enough in the court system that we started to see it being interpreted as a individual right to bear arms. The history of the Second Amendment wasn't about individuals. It was about the states protecting themselves from a federal tyranny, which is really ironic because now we've got Trump saying he's going to take federal power into states. And that is exactly what a well-regulated militia was put into the Constitution for, was to protect that from happening. Makes me wonder why Pritzker isn't saying that he is going to activate the National Guard to keep the Tennessee or Oklahoma or whatever National Guard from coming into his state. That would be quite the standoff because there ain't anybody on either side of that line that's going to want to fire at each other. I knew a gunsmith who left Australia because he could no longer work there. Well, I knew a farrier who had to find a different job because not nearly as many people have horses as they do or as they used to, because horses are too expensive, too hard to keep. It's a part of growth. Thank you, Michael, for saying that. Yes, tisk tisk. It is looking for an easy fix. And to be clear, we know that the assault weapons ban significantly reduced mass shootings in this country. And when it expired, the number of mass shootings in this country went crazy high, like 250% increase or something like that. So yes, it does have an effect. But as Brett Cross, the father of a Uvalde victim, would tell you, nobody in their right mind believes that an assault weapons ban is going to stop it. It's going to take us in the right direction. Thanks, Jennifer. I wonder if I've missed any questions on the YouTube side over here. How long have I been doing this? 41 minutes. Hey, that ain't so bad. And I got it right this time. It turns out when I hooked everything up last night and I could hear my microphone through my speakers, but it wasn't coming across on the StreamYard, and that's why there was no sound. And without sound, it doesn't record the audio or the video. So go figure. Hi, Joanne. My aunt's name was Joanne. What else can I talk about controversial? It's so sad thinking back, the 38 special was the baddest to be afraid. I'm guessing you meant to be afraid of. Yeah, isn't it though? Once upon a time, the weapon that America was afraid of and worried about and panicking over was a simple 38 six-shot revolver. My, how times have changed. Thanks, Carol. So as long as we're here, I'm going to take another, I don't know if it'd be controversial, but if anybody who disagrees with me wants to pop up, I'd be happy to talk to you about this. When I see these idiots like Charlie Kirk, and yes, I'm wearing my Unfuck America stuff tonight, Charlie Kirk and all the MAGA kids down there at Texas A&M, they always want to get into the abortion argument by arguing about what is a fetus, when is it a living person. And on the left, there's all the arguments about, well, until it can actually experience something, it's not a human being. Why do they argue that on either side? Because they are not going to change either side's mind that way. My frame of reference for the abortion issue, if anybody ever wanted me to come up and debate it, first off, let's establish which one of us has ever had to be pregnant. Obviously not me. Okay. And if it was a male debater, neither one of us has been pregnant. Okay. Have you ever had to take your wife, your pregnant wife, to the hospital in an emergency situation because she was bleeding like she shouldn't be? Yes, I have had to do that. Yes, we have had to have a D&C because of miscarriage. And it is a horrible, horrible thing to go through. Not quite as horrible as if we weren't able to, because then I would have been a widow and my 3 kids would have been without their mother. But I never hear that frame of reference argued. And I want to know, all these people who argue against abortion rights, how many of them have actually read Roe v. Wade? Because my very conservative political science teacher who worked in the first Bush White House, he made us study the Roe v. Wade decision. And guess what? It's probably one of the best, most solid, scientific, well thought out decisions in the history of the Supreme Court. Because they didn't look at it from a point of view of what are my personal beliefs and what does God say? It wasn't any of that. It was, what does the law and what does science say? They recognized that as a Supreme Court, they are supposed to reflect the values of the American people as well as interpret the Constitution and the law. So that's why when they were looking at this, they valued both sides, both viewpoints, and they did their best to reconcile the divergent viewpoints with the law. And that's why outside of arguments, they went to medical professionals, and that's how they came up with the 3 trimesters. What are the different stages of development of a human baby? In the first 3 months or in the first trimester, it's not a baby. It's not a human being with a heartbeat. And in case some of you don't know, the heartbeat bills, they're not actually hearing a heart because the heart hasn't formed yet. You're hearing a chemical reaction happen. So that Supreme Court said, we're going to use science and we're going to use the law and we're going to, not, everybody wasn't happy about it. The one side was like, no, there shouldn't be any opportunity for regulation. Keep the state out of it. And the other side was like, it needs to be absolutely banned. Get the state in it. The same people who have always, all my life, said that they fear big government. I fear big government, except when the government wants to enforce my religious beliefs. But I never hear anybody argue about the big government question in these abortion debates that you see online. I never hear them ask who has read Roe v. Wade, because they don't read it on either side. Nobody's read it anymore. And it's not that hard. It's not that terribly long. People, before they start running their mouths on either side of the issue in these online debates, need to go and read the decision. And they need to read the founders and how they believed in a right to privacy, and they believed that government should not be intrusive in individuals' lives. But they don't do that. You know why? Because just like the gun debate, the abortion debate is a moneymaker. I firmly believe one of the reasons why we've never made any progress in the gun debate is because it makes way too much money on both sides. The NRA is raking in those memberships. By the way, I know I said this last night for those who were here last night on the TikTok. I used to be a member of the NRA. It was 1992, maybe 93, when I was sitting at my kitchen table writing out my check, because back then we had checks. That's how old I am. I was writing out my check to renew my yearly membership with the NRA. And I had all the propaganda material that they send you with the forms to fill out and stuff. It was sitting there on the table right next to it. And I stopped in the middle of writing that check out because something on one of those forms caught my eye. It said that the Bill Clinton's, what do they call it? His Budget Act, whatever it was, Budget Deficit Reduction Act. It said that that bill had in it money that would take away the rights of gun owners and that they would be coming for our guns if the Budget Deficit Reduction Act were to pass. Well, as luck would have it, our very conservative newspaper in Pueblo, Colorado, printed the whole thing, the Budget Deficit Reduction Act. They printed the whole thing, took multiple pages front and back. And me, being the political nerd that I am, I read through every single item. And I made notes on every single item. Either I agree with this, I disagree with this, or what the hell is a mohair subsidy? And I made notes on all of it. And because I'd done that, when I was filling out my check to the NRA, something clicked about the information they sent me. I knew that Budget Deficit Reduction Act didn't say a damn thing about guns. Nothing. So I said to myself, Why are you writing a check to somebody that is using your check, your money, to print materials telling you lies? And that was the end of my involvement with the NRA. And when I ran for office for the state legislature a few years later, they had grades when they grade their potential candidates for endorsements. I was running against a lifetime NRA member. I never stood a chance. But it was supposed to be A, B, C, D, or F, or did not complete. I didn't fill out their questionnaire. They gave me an F and said I was rabidly anti-gun. The NRA is one of the most dishonest organizations on this planet. So that's just one example on the left of how they're making money off of the gun debate by using it to tell lies, which gets more people to sign up for memberships. And they became a strong and powerful enough organization that in 2016, the Russians were funding money into the NRA to help get Donald Trump elected. That's not speculation. That's documented fact. We all know it. So if there's any MAGAs out there, don't come after me on that before you look it up and find out it's true. On the other side, I can't think of any organizations off the top of my head that's just flat out making money on the pro-gun control side, but I know what's happening. I know that there are people out there who are making money off of it. Like I say, I don't know off the top of my head, but this is America, where we make money off of everything. Stu wants to know, well, now, do you not fancy, why don't I fancy running for public office again? All right, here's my political future, or political past. In 1996, I believe it was, out of college, and no, because I graduated in 97. Anyway, one of those days back in the 90s, after college, I ran for the state legislature in a very red district that I had no chance of winning. I was a corrections officer, and the biggest employer in my district was state corrections workers. I was very much for corrections workers. But Canyon City, former home of the KKK in Colorado, was still very much aligned with that kind of thinking. And to promote in Colorado Department of Corrections, when I was in it anyway, you had to be a member of the gun club. Plain and simple. You wanted to be a warden, you better be a part of the Canyon City Gun Club. And I couldn't get any traction there. The first time I ran, it's because there was nobody running against my current state representative, who turned out to later get arrested for child pornography. But that's another video. First time I ran, it's because nobody would, and I thought people need a choice. Without a choice, you have no voice. The second time, I had no intention of running with the same seat, and the party said they didn't have anybody to run. Won't you please do it again? I went, well, all right, whatever. So I did, and I put in half the time, raised twice the money, and got twice the number of votes. So the third time, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it for real this time. And I worked my ass off. And I did well enough to make the Republicans start spending money in my race. Still got my butt kicked. But that was the year the Democrats took over the state Senate in Colorado for the first time in a long time. So I like to think I did some good. So that was that. No more running for a long time. And then when my kids were in school down here in Trinidad, my third grade daughter and my fifth grade son were both bringing home the same math homework, my degrees in mathematics. So I'm like, this ain't going to fly. Couldn't get any answers. So I said, I'm going to run for the school board. First time I lost by a handful of votes. And I noticed I got about as many votes as doors that I knocked on. So I ran again, knocked on twice as many doors, got the same number of votes as doors I knocked on, and I won. And I sat on my school board. And then in 2013, I was laid out with back surgery. And while I was laying on the floor, I'm sitting there watching politics and just drowning myself in politics. And Nobody was going to run against my congressman. So I called up the state party. I said, who's going to run? Nobody. I said, well, then I'm going to. And they said, we're not going to help you. And I got zero support from the state party. I got no support from the national party because I didn't have a lot of money. When I called a couple of months in, I called up Denver Post and said, will you interview me? I'm the guy running against, by then it was Ken Buck. And the Denver Post said, no, you don't have $100,000 in the bank. You're not a real candidate. So I didn't run. Or I did run, but I didn't get an interview. And I was gone a lot. I put close to 100,000 miles on my car because we have a very big district. I missed a lot of time with my family. So I've still got the fire. If I could, I would. But I won't ask my wife to make the sacrifices again. If my wife comes to me someday and says, Vic, you need to run, then I'm running, and I'm running hard. But not until my wife says that she thinks it's a good idea. That's why, Stu. Thank you for recognizing Benavides. I didn't know anything about him. Yeah, I'm just sorry it took me so long to recognize a Hispanic American hero like that. How is the GOP on electing a PDF? You know, I can't wait for more people to ask that question. If I get a big enough following, if I start doing these TikTok debates, which I've been thinking about, then, yeah, if I give you my wife's number, she will kill me. Oh, I'm not supposed to say stuff like that on TikTok, am I? That was a joke, TikTok. Anyway, I should have done a video on a Hispanic American hero a long time ago. And I think I picked the perfect one to do it on this time. She who must be obeyed, Vic. Yes. Happy wife, happy life. Do you think trans people should have gun rights taken away? No, I think that is the dumbest thing I've seen come. Well, it's hard to say dumbest thing to come out of this administration because, you know, it's a daily challenge to say what's the dumbest. But I firmly believe that trans people have all the rights that I do. And side note, I live in Trinidad, Colorado. Those who are very deep into the knowledge about the trans community would probably know that Trinidad, Colorado was once the home and the birthplace of transgender surgeries. Dr. Biber at the hospital here pioneered the surgery. My wife worked in the same hospital as Dr. Biber. He passed away a few years ago. And we have probably a higher than average per capita trans population here in Trinidad. When I see somebody in Walmart that's trans, I'm not like, oh, there's a trans person. I'm like, oh, there's a person. They're just people as far as I'm concerned. They have the same rights that I do. I didn't serve in the military for the white oligarchy. My dad didn't serve. My grandpa didn't serve. All of my ancestors didn't serve for the white oligarchy. We served for the people of America. And I will stand up for the rights of anybody in America. New low every darn day. Yes, yes, sir, Katana. Sir, ma'am? I don't know. The picture makes it hard to tell. It's difficult finding people who see us as human after what happened. After what, I hope you're not talking about the shooting in Minnesota, because that's just, I mean, I saw a statistic the other day, the trans community represents 0.004%, something like that, of shooters in mass shootings. Now, if you want to talk about white males, we make up like 97% of the shooters. So people aren't using as an excuse to be afraid of me or any of you. Don't get sucked into the idea that the fact that this person may or may not have been a trans person is justification for reducing the level of freedom of the trans people in general. Currahee, Stu. I was in the 101st. Of course, Currahee wasn't at Fort Campbell, I don't believe. Well, Fort Campbell, I don't think was around yet. I don't remember. I should know that history better. It has been an hour. Guess what, folks? I'm about to turn into a pumpkin. I'm sorry for the questions that I didn't see in time to respond to. That's right, Phil. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Thank you for the interactions. I think I'm going to do this more often. I'll have to pick some different topics. If you have topics that you're interested in having me talk about, whether it be in my 3 to 6 minute videos or doing lives for my podcast, what have you, if you have topics you want to hear from me on, send them to resistorvic@gmail.com. resistorvic.com. And by the way, I'm going to finally get this off my chest. Why hasn't anybody ever bugged me because I spell resistor wrong? It's not really wrong. Resistor, if I am a resistor, a political resistor, then it's R-E-S-I-S-T-E-R, right? But I use the R-E-S-I-S-T-O-R as in electrical resistor because that's the kind of resistor that resists power. And there you have it. Stu, thank you for joining me in the wee hours of the morning all the way from Scotland. And by the way, Stu, and anybody else listening, one of the shows I want to do, one of the podcast episodes I want to do, I want to get people from overseas, like you, Stu, to be my guest. I would like to have 2 or 3 from across the pond to come on and have a discussion about what America looks like to them these days. Also, next week, I am going to have as my guest, unless she bails on the time again, Z Cohen Sanchez from the National Ground Game and the Unfuck America Tour. We're going to talk about their next event in Fort Collins, Colorado, that I can't go to because I can't get work off in my own state. And then later this month, I'm going to have Marta Levchenko. She is the person behind the orphanage where the proceeds from the Stand With Ukraine shirts go. She's going to be my guest, and I can't wait for that to happen. I'm super excited. So stay tuned, and thanks again for making me a part of your night. Good day.